People often notice and name the most extreme forms of things. So we find associated with the word cult the most dark, crazy, and cruel forms of human behavior. But most people are unconscious of the broader and more subtle understanding of cults. Originally, the word cult suggested worship and was not negative. In modern usage, the word took on negative connotations. The modern meaning of cult is, in part, the result of the mental development of humanity, where the mind begins to see devotion in its glamorous or illusory expressions. We humans in this highly devotional cycle become hero worshippers, and sadly, often in the sense of idol worship and mistaken loyalties. So, the pure devotion of the soul descends into the personality, becoming superficially ritualistic, superstitious, exaggerated, and exclusive. In other words, it becomes false and cultish. Even the word cult itself is used from a cultish point of view. That is, a cult is what we call the religious brainwashing down the street, from where we receive our own brainwashing. So we need to understand that groupthink is strong. Reflecting on the list of attributes of cults, one might ask, are not most religions and New Age movements cults? Isn't politics governed by cultish blindness? Isn't scientism and extreme nationalism cultish? Have we not all struggled through life under the binding spell of one cult or another? We can look at this in the light of a vital concept, that of degrees. Applying that common sense measure, we see that there are not two categories, cult and not a cult. Rather, we find that a great deal of human activity, particularly in the religious, metaphysical, and political fields, is to some degree cultish. It's just that this more widespread cultism is generally not in its most extreme and dark forms, so the elements of cultism in it are hard for people to recognize. The presence in some degree of one or a few cult-like attributes in a group or movement may not justify the strong label of cult. So, as an exercise in critical thinking, we can rate any given movement, any group activity, accessing the prominence of each cultish tendency. The question then becomes not, is this a cult or not, but rather, to what degree do we see cult characteristics in any group? Some definitions of cult relate the word to small groups, but it's not the smallness of a group that is determinative, but smallness of mind. There is a tendency to think of cults as minor swirls of activity within human society, but sometimes a small group can be less cultish than a large one. So size is not always key to cult status. There are large and small cults, and there are very new and very ancient ones. People may define a cult as something outside normal or established human society, But large and long-established cults also exist as an accepted part of society, even while not widely recognized as such. Numerous large cults are embedded in the fabric of accepted society. Some of these have benevolent and attractive aspects, but a careful look shows, with many large groups, the dark threads of cult consciousness are woven in with the bright threads of high ideals and humanitarian endeavor. It is also not unusualness or violation of norms that defines a cult. It is the violation of love that defines it. And it is narrow, unthinking behavior that defines it. So instead of a broad devotion to truth, we have narrow devotion to personalities, narrow devotion to human creeds and theological constructions. To escape these common paths, it's often necessary to violate norms and to be unusual. There are individuals beyond us in the scale of development and insight. There are always those to whom we can look for inspiration. But we should not try to shift responsibility for the course of our lives to any human group or leader. We should not, to put it in psychological and emotional terms, look to a leader or a group to take the place of the ideal parent or family that we never knew. There is nothing inherently wrong with the fact that we are all at a relatively undeveloped state compared to others ahead of us on the path of life, and that we naturally look to others for leadership. The problem arises when character weaknesses or psychological immaturity, perhaps left over from an unfortunate early life, lead us to completely surrender ourselves to a leader or group. Such surrender diverts us from the higher possibility of experiencing relationships as a catalyst for evolution of thought, love, and divinity within us. Those who encourage and accept our surrender are pseudo-teachers and false leaders. Such a pseudo-teacher violates the law of love by engaging in a conscious or unconscious game of power. This is dependent on the weakness and unthinking worshipful attitudes of followers. That which is often most attractive to members of a group, a charismatic leader, tends often to encourage unhealthy dependency and hero worship. The difference between any teacher and ourselves should be an opportunity for an apprentice-master relation, and not an occasion for uncritical submission to authority. A benevolent teacher who is free of cultism will encourage independent thought in us, and not devotion to a personality or narrow-minded belief system. The truth cannot be narrowed down to one person, one teaching, one book. The truths of life are to be found everywhere, and are not the exclusive property of any group or individual. Therefore, in our search for truth, let us think, and think broadly. Let us love, and love wisely.